Good morning. Glad to see you today. I am Joy Garrett Douglas, the Education and Programming Manager at the Dalí Museum. Thank you for joining us for this session of Coffee with the Curator. Welcome back for those who are returning. Today we are joined by the infamous Peter Tush. He's in the back for this session, and he is our curator and senior interpreter for our recent installment of Dalí's Jewels. Please check them out if you haven't been upstairs. But before we welcome Peter, we would like to thank the City of St. Petersburg for their continued support and sponsorship. Thank you, St. Petersburg, the city. And a special thanks to our members who make events like this possible. Thank you, members. And now I will introduce some of our wonderful programming for the rest of November. Some of it's already passed by, and you're here for our main event. And so Monday, the 11th, we have free admission for military and veterans for Veterans Day. And there's also an additional free admission that the veteran will receive with proper identification. There's more information on our website. So thank you to our veterans, and that's an all-day free admission, so 10 to 6. Then on Tuesday, the 12th, at 6 p.m., we have two different events. We have a busy day, one in our theater and then the other in our Raymond James room. However, the workshop, Surreal Pet Portrait Painting, is sold out. It's a wonderful workshop. This is our second pet portrait painting workshop, and I always see beautiful pieces once the workshop is over. So next time we have it, make sure you catch it. And then in the theater, we have The Subversive Eye, a roundtable featuring the collector David Raymond, which the art that we have for the Subversive Eye special exhibition coming up is part of his collection. So please come in. You can hear the collector himself speak about the pieces along with some of our wonderful curators. Then on the 13th, we have Art and Meditation, which is almost sold out as well, and that takes place in the theater. I know a lot of us need some peace right now, so make sure you get your free ticket online. And we also have another free event on the 14th, Thursday, in the theater, and that is Poetry at the Dalí with our former poet laureate, Helen Pruen Wallace. And then we also have on the 17th, Yoga at the Dalí, and that is a paid event, starts at 9 a.m. On the 20th, this is actually a typo. It should be 11:20, which is a Thursday. After next, we have Surreal Nights, where we have a DJ come in. We will have, I believe, the James Museum with an activity in the Raymond James room, and this is all on the ground floor, so it's free admission, so come party with us. And our next Coffee with the Curator for December introduces the Subversive Eye, Surrealist, and Experimental Photography from the David Raymond Collection, our special exhibition. And this is curated by Dr. William Jeffett, who is our curator of special exhibits. So if you really want to take a deep, deep, deep dive, listen to our curator who put the exhibit together. Now, for this talk, I would like to introduce Peter Tush for Dalí's Jewels. Anyone in here seen it? Can I get a raise of hands? Yes. Okay. It's a constellation of beauty. That's how I would describe it. So this is awesome that we're able to get to learn more about this exhibit, and Peter Tush will bring it to us. So Peter Tush is a curator and senior interpreter of the Dalí Museum, and he recently had a title change, and I like it. Tush has undergone, yeah, we clap for that. Tush has his undergrad degree in art history from New College in Sarasota and his master's in art history from the University of South Florida. He has been a part of the Dalí staff for over 2 decades. He is a key interpreter of the Dalí collection and special exhibitions. He trains the Dalí docents, scripts the audio guides, and gallery labels. Over the years, he has presented a wide range of Dalí-related topics, including surrealism and women, Dalí and Hollywood, and Dalí's Catalan heritage. In addition, Tush is a co-host of Step Outside on WMNF 88.5 FM Tampa. He's a DJ. So welcome DJ Peter Tush. You won't like that. But to the podium.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Joy, for a wonderful introduction. And I just want to take one moment to go back to this because in addition to this talk, a lot of our activities over the past 2 months have been focused on this exhibition, which is going to be opening in a couple weeks, I believe Saturday, a week from now. And we will have 6 opportunities for you as a member to meet with the collector, David Raymond. He is fascinating. He knows so much about the collection. And the photography exhibition that we're going to be showing, Subversive Eye, is very subtle and extremely unfamiliar to most. So even if you know some of the names, you probably are unfamiliar with some of the key images. So I would encourage you, if you do want to really participate, to go online to the membership page, find out when those are going to be happening. They're going to be happening during our member days, but it's a ticketed event where you'll be able to, with a small group of people, basically talk to David and have him explain some of the collection more personally. So if that sounds interesting, certainly take advantage of it. It's going to be Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday leading up to the public opening. And with that, we are here today to talk about a really interesting and extremely popular area of Dalí's enterprises, and that's Dalí's jewelry creations from about 1941 all the way through 1970. So a good 3 decades, Dalí committed to creating extraordinary objects and jewel creations. And we'll go through these two. We already mentioned those. Upstairs, I'm sure most of you have seen it already, but if you haven't, certainly I hope you take advantage of it. We have reinstalled a selection of jewels that we own that Dalí created. And there's a variety of different versions of these key pieces. The ones that we have that we're showing upstairs were originally owned by one of our co-founders, Eleanor Morse. And they were very prized possessions. She wore these constantly with great love. And what we're going to be talking about is the more kind of rarefied versions of these pieces. So these were pieces that Eleanor and Reynolds Morse were able to procure from Alemany & Company, but there are some extraordinary ones that we'll be talking about that are in the Foundation collection, the Theater Museum in Spain. Great quotes that Dalí shares about this. This was really a very focused project of his. And this one is just an observation about it. Inspired by artists of the Renaissance, Dalí designed jewels that were where the craftsmanship outweigh the material value of the golds and gems. So for Dalí, it was the idea and the exquisiteness of the creation rather than the sheer value of the extraordinary gems and gold and platinum that was used in the creation. So we're going to start just very briefly by reminding everybody that one of the things that I think really appeals to the public about Dalí is that he brought his ideas beyond the canvas. He was a great draftsman, he was a great painter, but he was very much everywhere, doing all things. And so, for example, he was creating objects for the house and objects to enter into our world, like the amazing lobster telephone upstairs. He worked in the world of fashion. He became friends with Coco Chanel and Elsa Schiaparelli and worked with both of them in designs. He created a pavilion for the New York World's Fair in 1939, sort of a topless mermaid show. Who knew? He worked with both Alfred Hitchcock and Walt Disney in the 1940s, creating dream scenarios for Spellbound and an animated movie that finally was completed in 2003 called Destino. In 1944, and actually through a number of years in the late 30s and early 40s, Dalí was fascinated by opera and ballet and got involved in a lot of scene designs and costuming designs, as the one that we see here for Sentimental Colloquy. And this is the period of time when Dalí got deeply involved in jewelry. Dalí's jewels embody the love of everything that is gilded and excessive. That's a very accurate statement. Quote by Dalí, he says, "My art encompasses physics, mathematics, architecture, nuclear science, the psycho-nuclear, the mystico-nuclear, and jewelry, not paint alone. My jewels are a protest against the emphasis upon the cost of the materials of the jewels themselves." So, and there'll be similar quotes going through here. So in the 1940s, as Dalí enters into this idea about creating jewelry, he falls under the influence of a number of key figures, not surprisingly. In particular, Mad King Ludwig and this idea of bankrupting your country in order to create your dream palace and your dream reality was very much on Dalí's mind. He wanted to live in a dream environment. The jewelry, in a sense, is a way of creating that sort of extravagance of dreams that could be actually worn for others to see and envy. Dalí also took a great number of pages from one of his heroes, Leonardo da Vinci. And I think what da Vinci really embodied for Dalí is that idea that an artist is not just a painter. An artist is everything. An artist should be involved in all aspects of creation, all aspects of observation. Science should be as much a product of what they do as painting. And so this kind of feverish imagination of the Renaissance man was something that definitely Dalí envied and tried his own hand at. These are some of the designs that Leonardo da Vinci came up with when thinking about mathematics, held a deep influence on Dalí. And I think the one particular artist from the Renaissance who was also an extraordinary jeweler that left a deep impact on Dalí was Benvenuto Cellini. And Kim had invited me, I guess a couple years ago, to do I want to say Coffee with a Curator. It's, what do we call it? Follow the Tangent, thank you. And I talked about and shared some of these ideas at that point, so I've expanded upon them here. But I think Cellini was an artist from the Renaissance who really appreciated just transforming the world into these kind of extraordinary, exquisite objects that were both beautiful and in the same way not really useful. It's like the object itself superseded its ability to function as it was supposed to. And Dalí became fascinated by him and actually did an illustrated version of his autobiography, which is almost as extraordinary as Dalí's own secret life. So very interesting read. Dalí also fell in love with the idea of the crown jewels and this kind of extraordinary opulence that they represented and the exquisite extravagance and the weirdness, I suppose, of all of these, how they represent themselves. And of course, had a deep, deep love of Fabergé, the House of Fabergé, and the kind of extraordinary jewel creations that they had. So these are all in the back of Dalí's mind as he approaches this. And in the early 1940s, Dalí had the first chance to really go forward with the idea of creating jewels based on his ideas and the extravagance of his ideas. And he met this gentleman, the Duke Fulco di Vedura. And in 1939, for Vogue magazine, in an article called First Prophecy of Jewels, Dalí talks about his idea for mobile jewelry. According to Dalí, the jewels would be fitted with a mechanism that could be wound up like a watch. And we'll actually see that eventually he does create these, but he's still a little bit early in 1939 before the opportunity happens. And Dalí says, very much about all of his jewels, he says, my object is to show the jeweler's art in true perspective, where the design of the craftsmanship is valued over the gems themselves, like in the Renaissance times. This is the gentleman that we're talking about. This is Duke Fulco de Vedura. He was a jeweler for Coco Chanel and a great friend of hers, and she was his employer. And in 1940, he designed 5 jewels for in collaboration with Dalí for the New York showroom that he was opening on Fifth Avenue. So he was very much committed to some of Dalí's ideas. And it really corresponds with the story of Dalí in America, because they met when Dalí had come to Virginia and when he was working on the plantation of Caresse Crosby. So this is Hampton Manor in Bowling Green. And Dalí describes the jewel ideas that he had, these ornaments, medals, crosses, objets d'art, you find are not conceived to rest soulless in steel vaults. They were created to please the eye, uplift the spirit, stir the imagination, and express convictions. So he was very much, a publicist for these ideas that he was starting to develop. And what Vedura came up with was, in this collection of 5 pieces, he referred to this collection as the out of this world from the celestial to the surreal collection. a very apt name for what he was coming up with. And the introduction to Dalí is one of those just crazy stories that is real and yet very surprising. When Caress Crosby tried to introduce Dalí to Vidura, they decided to invite him to Bowling Green and come down to the plantation. But then they had a change of mind. What they decided to do is that there was a house nearby that was dilapidated and abandoned. And they decided that this would be where the introduction would happen. And they basically chose it and tried to create it and amplify the idea that it was a haunted house. And so Vidura had never been there. This was where he was driven to by Caress. Dalí was waiting for him, as was Gala, in the living room. There were holes in the wall. It was definitely in ruins. And I think the idea was to just, really spook Vidura. And this is his own drawing about this experience of meeting Dalí in Virginia. So this is very much like out of the Addams Family kind of books, but this is the Harper's Bazaar drawing that he does. And of course, what happens is the surprise in the middle of this introduction where it's like, oh, this is not the house at all. Do not fear. This will be a great collaboration, not a haunted collaboration. And it leads to the creation of some really interesting pieces. This is the Dalí Medusa brooch. It's a brooch where Dalí has created the painting underneath the stone, surrounded by all the serpents, which is really lovely and very apt maybe for some of the people who wound up wearing them. This is the Apollo and Daphne brooch. And again, Dalí contributed the drawing, the painting underneath, as well as the design of what he wanted Vidura to create. And something that's very apt with the Saint Sebastian drawing that we have upstairs, this is the Vidura arrow earrings and Saint Sebastian objet d'art. So it was both jewelry to be worn and objects to be appreciated. And then I believe in 1941 for Vogue magazine, Dalí creates a drawing to more or less publicize this new collection. And you can see he's included the Medusa, the Gorgon, Apollo and Daphne, and also Saint Sebastian within this drawing. So it's really kind of capitalizing and promoting what his ideas are and wanting them to get into circulation. Eventually, the set of 5 pieces was displayed at the Julian Levy Gallery in New York, and then it went on traveling around the country. So it was not one-off pieces to be purchased, but rather show pieces to be, seen before there was any purchasing happening. But of course, they were purchased. 3 of the 5 were purchased by Millicent Rogers, the Standard Oil heiress, and I think you can see sort of the extraordinary ability to display these extravagant jewels. And then her friend, the Russian courtier, Valentina, picked up the one that was called the dogwood brooch. And in 1943 for Vogue magazine, Dalí did another advertisement promoting these jewels. And you can see the dogwood brooch right over here, the red sort of propeller shape on the bottom left. And lastly, in 1941, there was an additional object that was created. It was a spider cigarette case. And you can see it just has this wonderful sort of beetle off to the side. And then this, daddy long-legged spider with the female head walking across it that Dalí had painted. So it's the Gorgon-headed spider painting of 1940. And it sold in Christie's quite a while earlier for about $32,000. And it's nice, it has a connection, of course, same year, same idea, another daddy long-legged spider in our Daddy Longlegs of the Evening Hope. So the painting you can see capitalizes on the same curious spider that fascinated Dalí at that time in Virginia. And just to give you a sense that jewelry is definitely something that Dalí was thinking about even more often than producing, here's an advertisement for the portrait of an exciting woman from 1941 for the Chen Yi lipstick. And you can see the jewelry is very prominent, the melting watch that's on her wrist. For the 1945 Hitchcock movie Spellbound, this is one of the unused scenes, but you can see the sort of the pierced arrow going back to the theme of Saint Sebastian with the neck, the collar that was being worn by Ingrid Bergman. And then even in 1945, this amazing painting, Gallerina, which is owned by the foundation in Spain. You can see the prominent jewel, the wrist band that she's wearing, which is just absolutely extraordinary. And Dalí spent as much time on that as the rest of the painting, even more so. So that is the focal point. And then the continuation of the jewelry story goes from the Fulco di Vedura to Alemany and Ertmann. So beginning in 1949, almost a decade later, Dalí has the opportunity to meet a Finnish shipping magnate named Eric Ertmann and his colleague Carlos Alemany, who was an Argentine-born tango orchestra conductor who became a jeweler. At some point, he went from music to creating these incredible stones and to create a collection of jewels that had just incredible opulence. The really important thing is we know that Dalí stayed at the St. Regis Hotel for the decades to come. That is where Alemany and Company had their jewelry store, at the bottom floor of the St. Regis Hotel. So it was a perfect opportunity to do exactly what Dalí wanted to do, these extraordinary creations. This is the two of them. Alemany became Dalí's principal jeweler, and there were two particular gentlemen who worked for him who both came from the house of Fabergé. So he had two extraordinary jewelers who were up to the task of creating these objects that Dalí had envisioned. According to Alemany, 75% of the value was placed on the workmanship and not the exquisite stones. But Dalí was very involved in not just doing the drawings and conception of them, but also thinking about how the stones, how they would symbolize his ideas. So for example, rubies represented energy, where sapphires represented tranquility, and lapis lazuli represents the subconscious mind in Dalí's thoughts. And what Dalí would do is he would produce these drawings. And so Alemany spent $5,000 to get Dalí's drawing and conception for the jewelry. What Dalí gave him was probably different than what he wanted. I think he thought for $5,000 he'd get 5 separate drawings, which would each have their own Dalí stamp and signature, and he could later sell them and make some money back. Well, Dalí sort of short-shifted him and gave him one drawing with 5 jewels on it, signed once, so you couldn't cut it up and sell them separately. So I don't know how much that mattered, but it seems very typical and telling about their relationship. But this is the way that Dalí would present his ideas to Alemany. And then this is the way that they marketed the creation. So this is 1951, just 2 years later. Modern mechanics, certainly the place all great jewelry enthusiasts would look for ideas about new jewels. But this is, of course, a selection of how to please your wife. You can see Dalí here sitting with one of the models, showing off some of his pieces, and this kind of extraordinary arrangement of jewels. The part right in the very center, here it is, distinctive Surrealist jewelry is guaranteed to fatten almost any wife's ego and flatten almost any husband's bank account. They're having a lot of fun with this. It's very telling of the times. It's pretty amazing to see these words in print, but it just really captures sort of the flavor of the way that they decided to spin these. And now what I'm going to share with you is a selection of some of the major ones that are really cherished and loved by people. Dalí says here, talking about his jewelry project a little bit later, he says, my art and we already actually used this one. I'm going to go right past it. That idea that jewelry is a part of everything that he's doing. Here's another one of his studies, and this one includes at the very top the telephonic ear clips. So there's other things on here as well. This is a 1941, I don't think that's right. I really think this is a 49 drawing. But these are the creations that are owned by the foundation. These are the telephonic earrings. And Dalí says that the ideal object to me is an object that is useful for absolutely nothing, that could be used for writing or removing superfluous hair or for telephoning. An object which would not be placed on the mantelpiece or the Louis XIV commode. An object which one is forced simply to wear a jewel. So his idea is uselessness adds to the luster of these pieces. This is the version that Eleanor Morse had made for herself, or that Reynolds Morse arranged. So this is the one that I believe is in the Foundation's collection. And here you can see it's a more simplified version, but this is what Alemany and Company were able to do. They were able to do additional pieces. And there are a couple of these that have multiples. But these were not like a line of jewels like they are now. We have the recreations, a couple of them in our store, but at the time they were done to order. And so we don't know how many or how few of any of these were made, but we do know, for example, that the Eye of Time, there were 4 of those created for different clients. And the uselessness, the idea of the telephone as being something that is taken out of its normal setting and transformed in Dalí's work is very much in keeping with both our painting at the top, the telephone in a dish with 3 grilled sardine, and then these other ones, The Sublime Moment and The Enigma of Hitler, where the telephone is somewhat emblematic of the uselessness of communication. So it sort of amplifies that idea. Dalí also has this long quote here about anthropomorphism, and a lot of these jewels are definitely about taking something inanimate and turning it into something that's animate. He says that anamorphic themes appear and reappear in my jewels. I see the human form in trees, leaves, and animals. I see animal and vegetable characteristics in humans. My art demonstrates how metamorphosis comes about. Human beings create and change. And he goes on to say, the new metamorphosis takes place in heaven. The body becomes once again whole and reaches perfection. So for him, there is this idea that anthropomorphism is essential as a transformative element, which brings us to the very bad pun, the ruby lip with the teeth of pearls. Poets of all ages, of all lands, write of ruby lips and teeth like pearls. It remained for Dalí to translate this poetic cliche into a true surrealist object. I think that's how Don Addis summarized these. But they are exquisite, they are hideous, as well as being just absolutely fascinating. I mean, they are just, you just can't erase it once you've seen it. Originally, they sold for $3,000, so that's what you could expect to pay back in 1951, 1949 for a pair like this. And of course, the ruby lips, very much a part of Dalí's world, all the way to going to his museum and seeing the room that transforms into Mae West's face with her ruby lips. So it's very much something that Dalí returns to over and over again. This is the veined leaf hand. They're clip brooches and a pin, designed in 1949. Here you can see them advertised. A pair of pins are made from gold fashioned into leaf veined hands with cabochon rubies and fingernails. And at this point, 2,700, and they were yours. Which relates to this really exquisite and very curious starfish that Dalí designs, which was to be worn around the hand, almost like a semi-glove. And it was owned by Rebecca Harkness, the heiress. Dalí designed his diamond and ruby starfish brooch with the pearl in its center, and emerald leaves growing from it. Can't decide whether it's a fish or a flower. So he's very much fascinated by that idea. And then here you can see the 1995 photograph, I believe, from Sotheby's, Christie's, sold for $170,000 in 1995. Here we have another one of these collected studies where you have a couple different things. Of course, we have the Eye of Time at the very top. There's some of the hearts, and there's the Tree of Life necklace. This is the pomegranate heart. Dalí described it as the many-celled reddish pomegranate berry pulses with life. The slightly acidic flavor of the fruit is agreeable, and acidity stimulates human accomplishment. So also a very nice gift for the holidays around Valentine's Day, something to think about. Here we have a model showing it. $4,500 was the price that it was originally offered for. And I should say too, one of the things that we're going to come to is the fact that all of these pieces that I'm showing you were purchased almost immediately, like 1950 or 51, by the Catherwood Foundation, which leads me to believe that because this is listed at $4,500, they would make you one for that price, but they were already, in addition, procured by the Catherwood Foundation. And we'll talk about that because that's what winds up in Spain as the 39 jewelry pieces in their collection. This is the honeycomb heart brooch from 1949. There's a little bit of sweetness in the heart of every woman. Oh, how sweet, how lovely. Here's the study for the Tree of Life necklace, and you can see a little more closely when it's finished. It's really quite fun and lovely. And here's an advertisement from a newspaper talking about it for $6,500. We have the model wearing it, and in the background is a painting that's in Helena Rubinstein's apartment in New York City that Dalí painted for her. And this is the one that you can see upstairs that I think fascinates a lot of us. This is the Tree of Life bracelet and also earrings. In addition, there's also a necklace. So originally, well, when these finally sold, $1,195 for the set. If you look at it very closely, it's very tiny. And why that's fascinating to us is because Eleanor Morse wore these all the time. Whenever there was a really special event, she would wear the necklace and the earrings. And it looks very painful. These edges are not rubber, they're not refined, they're not, it's kind of prickly. So to wear this, it's very tight fitting, and it is, so there's a little bit of suffering for Dalí involved in wearing some of these pieces. And Eleanor Morse was committed to that. In 1953, the Eye of Time brooch is created. It's a watch with blue enamel, diamonds, platinum, and carboche rubies. And there's 4 versions of this that we know exist. And I'll come back to that in a second. Here's the advertisement for it, and it was originally listed at $5,500 in 1949. Really stunning sort of a presentation. Probably my favorite of all the presentations is this one, where it's a little bit scary, a little bit off-putting, but pretty fascinating, where the eye and the lips come together in that kind of anthropomorphic combination. And here's how it's described at the time: surrounded by a row of pave set diamonds and set in platinum with a cabochon ruby. The eye's pupil is made of 3 shades of blue enamel and brilliantly doubles as the face of a working movado movement. So it was a working clock. I don't know if they're all still working at this time, but they were for quite a while. And in 2014 at Sotheby's, sold for $1 million. So the originals are pretty cherished. Here's a study for a number of other pieces, in particular this wonderful corset ring that you can see on the bottom right. And this is what the ring looks like. It is a corset ring with gold and pearls as the ties for the sort of bondage-inducing piece of lingerie. And another extraordinary photograph to bring all these about. Here we have another model. This is, Madel Hegler, who poses with several of the pieces, including the Eye of Time monocle. And that brings us to the melting watch, the persistence of memory, along with a couple other pieces. Probably Dalí's most iconic image was transformed, of course, into one of these objects. This is the persistence of a memory pin with gold and diamonds from 1949. Dalí describes it as the materialization of the flexibility of time and the invisibility of time and space. Time is not rigid, it is one with space fluid. Not exactly sure what that means, but I'm sure Dalí was onto something with that. Retailed for $4,500 again. And what was interesting is apparently right under the signature, you could open that, there was a real timepiece that was tiny, but was working. So the clock itself does not run, but underneath, you can actually see it. This is Eleanor Morse's piece. The timepiece was under this one, the original one that's in Spain. And just one that you'll see upstairs that, find really appealing. This is the Tristan and Isolde locket, gold, platinum, diamonds, and garnets. And it's based on that classic illusion of, the head goblet. Is it 2 faces? Is it a goblet? Yes, it's both of those, the classic goblet illusion that Dalí just brings about. And he refers to it as Tristan and Isolde, which was one of his favorite Wagner, ring cycle pieces related to fated love and tragedy. So Dalí was buying into that. What I'm not going to show you are the 20 or more additional pieces that were created after this, but I do want to just mention there's a bit of Liberace fascination with some of these that are way over the top. What I've shown you are both funny and extraordinary and strange, but I think they get to be a little much as Dalí goes on into the late 50s and early 60s. But this is one called The Light of Christ, and there's a number of these. I do want to show you, though, 2 of the mechanized pieces. These are just really, really amazing. This is the study for the Royal Heart, and it was inspired by Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. And it is actually, it's got the sort of the crown jewel, headpiece. It's like a gold chunk of heart that has inside of it, like a tabernacle, a ruby heart that looks very much like a human heart. And it actually has a mechanism in it that beats. And it stopped. The one that's owned by the foundation finally stopped. But there is a film of it that I'm going to try to show. So this was created, as I said, in the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. Gold-plated brass with Swarovski crystals. I got that right. And faux pearls, 46 rubies, 42 diamonds, 4 emeralds, and there's like a mesh around the rubies. So let's see if this works. It worked earlier. There you can see. Pretty creepy, pretty off-putting. I think that's part of the extraordinary appeal of this, is that there's that push and pull between fascination and kind of grotesquerie. But you just get a sense that this was something that Dalí really loved, is this idea of the mechanized jewel, something that actually moved. There was something about it that could be set in motion. I don't have a film for this one, but there is one online. I couldn't get it to work, but this one's called The Living Flower. It's the study for it. Here you can see it, and the blossom of hands would open and close. So the stem is made of gold. The golden petals have diamonds embedded in the inside of the outstretched hands. The mound of malachite from the Belgian Congo hides the mechanism, a simple matter of weights and pulleys which sets in motion an electrical impulse, the flower of life. So it's this kind of extraordinary over-the-top. By 1957, the prices were getting a little bit higher, so this one was $44,000, far more involved as an object. And then finally, I'm just going to tell you about the collection's history, because all the pieces I've shown you, except for the Folco de Vidura pieces, are all part of one set. And so, depending on where you read it, either 1949 or 1953, a Philadelphia millionaire, banker, and philanthropist named Cummins Catherwood and his wife acquired the first 20 jewels. So this is almost right off the bat. Dalí starts in 1949. By at least 1953, if not earlier, 20 of these that haven't even been finished yet are acquired by Catherwood. And as soon as they are produced, they are placed in a Bryn Mawr Foundation for $200,000. They're sold to be used as a fundraising tool. So I know I've met a number of visitors here at the museum. I don't know if you know of any, or even you yourself may have seen these, but these traveled around the country pretty extensively. And it was called the Art and Jewel Exhibit by Salvador Dalí. This is a catalog some of you may have seen or may even own, which was the original Catherwood Collection catalog from the New York Graphic Society. The gentleman who wrote the catalog is the Metropolitan Museum of Art curator of prints, and he says, though many of Dalí's jewels would also amuse the most surfeited, others startle with the note of the not common in such expensive objects, which explode with agony. I love that idea, the exploding agony of these pieces. So by 1958, so these have been traveling around for a few years. There's 20 of them at this point. 1958, this entire collection is purchased by the Owen Cheatham Foundation. And it's acquired from Catherwood, and they additionally purchased 17 more pieces over the next decade. So it continues to expand, and all the drawings that Dalí did are part of the collection. So the collection was lent out to veritable charitable organizations, very much like the original intent. In 1967, it was all valued at over $5 million. So that's back in 1967, only a decade later. And in the 1960s, this collection came to rest at the Virginia Museum of Arts in Richmond. So if any of you are from Virginia or would make frequent trips through Richmond, you may have seen this. And it stayed there all the way until 1980, when the Cheatham family decided to put it up for sale, and the museum could not raise the funds to make it happen. So long story short, it was originally purchased by some Saudi millionaire, who then eventually sold it to some Japanese entities. It was at the Minami Jewelry Museum in Japan for a number of years, and then they went bankrupt. And the good thing about that bankruptcy is that they were then able to be purchased by the Dalí Foundation in Spain. And so in 1999, all 39 jewels and 27 drawings by Dalí were purchased by the Fundació Salvador Dalí Gala for 5.5 million euros, if this is to be believed. I assume it is. And they're housed permanently in the museum there. It's an annex right next to the Gala Tower, and it has a separate admission. So you can go in and visit it at any point. Here's the emblem that they use for the jewels. This is the entranceway. And then when you walk up into the stairs, it's quite a wonderful experience with these reflected eyes of Dalí, the multiple cyclops kind of experience. And you come into it, and it's 2 stories, and each one of these windows has just its own extraordinary discovery about Dalí. So here you can see, this is some pieces I didn't talk about, but there's a cosmic elephant. There's one of these crosses with almost veins of blood made inside of it. And there's a really wonderful catalog that was made available back in 2001. We have a small version of it available in our store if you're interested in hunting that down. We also have 2 recreations available in the store. I believe they're the Eye of Time and the lips, the ruby lips. So if you need one of these pieces to take home this afternoon, we can make that happen. Last note, another quote by Dalí: "Without an audience, without the presence of spectators, these jewels would not achieve the function for which they were created. The viewer is thus the final artist. His look, heart, and mind, with greater or lesser ability to understand the creator's intention, imbue these jewels with life." So this idea about seeing them, enjoying them, experiencing them, that's really what it was all about for Dalí. He wanted these to be acknowledged and to be cherished. And with that, if you have a moment, I invite you after this talk to just go upstairs and look at Eleanor Morse's collection of these pieces, which is now, of course, our collection. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this very curious and perhaps underwhelming video made by British Pathé TV in 1960 when this collection was actually shown in London, England. And it's both extraordinary and it sort of hits the wrong note, but I think it helps to just think about it. Just 1 decade after they were created, in 1960, they were shown in England. And yet you can see some of these in motion. So after the commercial. Oh, please. I thought I had this set up. Skip, please. You know what? This is terrible. I'm not able to skip it.
I trust those pros.
And I can't mute it from here, so either... It's only 19 seconds.
The bros you know. Air Bros Air Conditioning.
Air Brothers are sponsoring this talk, apparently. I did not intend that, but they keep stopping. Come on, play. Okay, theairbrothers.com. We're getting closer. Now we have only supposedly 5 seconds. Let's see if that's true. And now? There it is.
That race might have been unusual, but here's something quite unique. Some of the highlights of an exhibition of more than £500,000 worth of jewelry designed by the fabulous Salvador Dalí. Pieces like Living Flower, which opens to reveal stamen and petals paved with diamonds. The mechanism is embedded in malachite from the Congo, which to Dalí represents the unknown latent forces, while the gold and diamond flowers, known beauty and creativity. In contrast, his angel cross, the hypoxiological concept of existence, whatever that means. The jewels from the collection of the Owen Cheetham Foundation of America are being exhibited in London in aid of charity. The public are not, however, generally allowed to try them for size. The Eye of Time, described by Dalí as anthropomorphic, but of course. Dalí's gold cube cross. Leaf-veined hands, what he described as vegetal vision, or hands reaching out into the future. We might just interrupt here to explain that Dalí the painter applied himself to jewelry because he felt that in modern times, importance has been put on the stones themselves rather than on the art form. This, by the way, is his surrealist translation of the poet's image of ruby lips and teeth like pearls. Finally, the royal heart, pulsating rubies representing our queen, heart beating constantly for her people, while the nugget gold symbolizes the people sheltering and protecting their ruler.
So with that, thank you all for coming out today. Enjoy the collection. And I guess we have time for questions if anybody would like. Yes.
The Royal Heart that you just showed, was there a teeny tiny battery in that?
Yeah, so the Royal Heart that keeps beating, it does keep beating because there is some sort of mechanism that's able to drive it, which would have to have a battery. I don't know how that all works because it was created in 1949, so whatever they were using then, it might have been adapted at some point, but there has to be a power source. For any of these that have movement in them, there has to be some sort of power source. But I'm saying that it could also be a wound kind of watch type of mechanism, which is very possible. So I wouldn't rule that out, and that might be more likely. Yeah. Other
You're streaming online. Sorry, this is loud. So please use the microphone and just raise your hand. I'll come over to you. And I saw Arthur's hand.
So Peter, early on you talked about how he felt that the artistry was more important than the materials, but it looks like over time the materials became much more valuable. I'm wondering if that might have been the influence of Gala, and also, other than the painting, did Gala like to have these things and wear them?
Yeah, so the first question, I think, very straightforward. I think Dalí is throwing us a curveball by saying that, the value of the piece is not that important. I think he went out of his way to kind of force Alemany and have to come up with the most extraordinary jewels to make these pieces. So I think that the value of the jewels was a big part of it, but he wanted the artistry to be over the top. The curious thing is that question about Gala, I still don't know if she wore some of these or not, because I've never really seen any photos other than one of Gallerina with the wrist brace that I've never seen before. It's not one of these pieces. So it could be she just found them to be uncumbersome, but I don't know. It's a good question.
Two questions. One is, did he ever connect his jewelry vision with the altarpiece in the church in Curates, which was huge, gold, and over the top?
I would say yes. I would say that was his probably childhood inspiration for this kind of approach to, creating jewelry. There is the church that Dalí was very familiar with in Curates when he was a child during his teen years, had one of the most extraordinary Baroque altarpieces, just covered in gold and going from floor to ceiling. It was just one of those experiences where it's a kind of square chapel when you walk into it, and so your entire vision is enveloped by that huge altarpiece. And I know that he was deeply in love with that, and also the Palau de Música in Barcelona, which is also over the top with decoration. So I think those two experiences from his childhood kind of primed the pump for this sort of approach.
And my second question, you listed lapis lazuli and each of three jewelry materials and what they stood for. Would you repeat that?
Ooh, okay.
Or I'll go back to the video.
Yeah, I know it was
Thank you.
sapphires and rubies, but yeah, I'd be making it up if I was trying to tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Oh.
I hope to express in the correct way. I don't know if it's just my mind, but I always try to join or compare one artist with another one. And when you express or explain the meaning of the value of the jewelry, I just can join this thought with Andy Warhol work. Can you give me your opinion about that? Because Warhol tried to express the same value to the art that he have. So
sure. So, and I can briefly say that when I used to present this talk on the jewels, the monetary sale prices, I didn't have access to them. And internally, we always wondered what Eleanor Morse and Reynolds Morse paid for the pieces when they had them. We wondered how that related to the pieces in Spain. And over time, we've been able to kind of locate some of these original prices, which I think, and also the more recent resale value prices, which has really helped us to understand sort of the market dynamics behind a collection like this. So that's why I share those. But you're right, there's such an emphasis on the monetary value that it does become almost equal with the artistry as we're talking about it. Warhol was a very important part of Dalí's world. Originally, when Warhol saw Dalí and watched him, with his entourage, there was a sense of both envy and recognition that this is how an artist should live and behave. And at a certain point, certainly Warhol took the idea of the factory and the production from this kind of exquisite, one-of-a-kind idea to a kind of equal opportunity for everybody to be producing and buying, and the kind of leaving it from the craftsmanship and the kind of sheer precision to something that was much more democratic, might be a word for it, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think that's a really important point, that the two artists are somewhat operating on the same direction in terms of monetary value, but for different ends.
Hi, Peter. I had a comment on the value of the jewels. In my time with Dalí, I had the opportunity and the pleasure of attending a few meetings with Carlos. And Carlos would often present to Dalí jewels that he'd found so Dalí could design objects around them. And one of the last ones that I saw was like a 450 carat topaz heart that was supposed to be suspended in the center of a circular hologram, only that they found out that you couldn't see the hologram with the heart hanging in the thing. So Carlos would often come up with big, spectacular crystals or whatnot for Dalí to get ideas from.
Thank you for sharing that. I have actually a perfect rejoinder to that, which is it was the Morses who were going to be the clients for that project. And when it didn't work, what they did is they kept the plate, I believe, that Dalí had painted under, that he wanted to have the topaz turn into many, many faceted versions of the heart in the middle. They gave that stone to the Denver Museum of Natural History, where Reynolds Morse's grandfather had been on the board of trustees. So they gave it in I guess, commemoration of Salvador Dalí, but it was also because of his grandfather that it's there. But if you go in the Natural History Museum in Denver and look around, you will suddenly see this extraordinary stone that came from Alemany and Company that is, given by Reynolds and Eleanor Morse to the museum in memory of Dalí and also his grandfather. So yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, the museum unfortunately does not own the watercolor for that. I don't know the history of how it came onto the Morse's radar. I don't know if it had already moved forward and then they were brought in as clients or if they were involved in the commission level, but yeah, I don't know a lot of the detail behind it. That's very appropriate to know that Alemany brought to Dalí ideas like, here's something, what could you do with it? And Dalí would run with that idea. Any other questions? That's one more.
I was wondering when Dalí stopped doing what Pierre, because all those are pretty old, obviously, from the 40s and 50s. And I was wondering if maybe the last work with him in gold would be the Dalí d'Or that he did with Piaget in 1960.
Yeah.
Which
I've got to say, I'm not sure what the last piece is in the sequence. That's interesting what you're proposing, but I think, I know he continued with Alemany into the early 70s. I can't remember what the last one was, but one of the last pieces was called The Grapes of Death, or the Vines of Death, and it was a large stone that Dalí had painted underneath an image, and then attached this kind of cluster of what looked like grapes, little gold grapes and then sapphire grapes, but when you look closely, they were skulls. So it's a kind of extraordinary piece. It's not the very last piece, but it's close to it. So he did continue all the way into the early 70s, but I hate to say I don't remember which piece was like the final collaboration between them.
Yeah, because I remember back in the 80s at the first occurrence of this museum on the harbor, you had a temporary collection that came over called the Lucas Collection, which presented a lot of the jewel made with Dalí's money by Piaget. And I haven't heard much about that since.
I have to say, I'm not familiar with that exhibit, but I will certainly look into it. That's fascinating. I'm glad you shared that with me. I was unfamiliar with it, but yeah, I definitely want to know more. So thank you for mentioning that. Maybe next time I present this, I'll have a little more I can add to it.
Okay.
But that sounds great. Oh, and one final question up front. And then if you have other questions, feel free to just come forward to me.
Thank you, Peter. This is fascinating. So Dalí was not only a remarkable painting artist, but also with his jewelry design. And I noticed a lot of the examples that you showed prominently show his signature. Do you know if, I mean, what a marketing genius that is, because Frankie, when you
Yep.
get me one of these, I want it with his name on it, please. But anyway, did he always do that, or was this just something recently? Do
Whenever
you know?
there was an opportunity to sell the Dalí brand, Dalí was ready to sell the Dalí brand. He was
Genius marketing.
Yes, yeah, he was the first artist of the 20th century, I think, to truly embrace that idea about not being concerned about it at all. That is what he did, front and center.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming out today.